Okay.
All right. Hi, I'm Jennifer Whitley, Community Historian for the Hill District CDC here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And today I am here with Mr. Ron Porter
Yes.
of Ron Porter Consulting. He is also a columnist for the New Pittsburgh Courier.
Yeah, occasional.
Okay,
columnist.
occasionally columnist, among other things, which you can definitely tell us more about and we'll get into. But we are here working on a new initiative that the Hill CDC has, and what we're doing is we're interviewing people, past and present residents of the Hill District, and we're just getting their stories and their thoughts about various historical places on the Hill District. So we are here interviewing Mr. Porter today. He has a lot of information he's going to share with us and some great stories. So we're just going to start, if that's okay, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your history as far as growing up on the Hill District, where you grew up on the Hill.
Okay, I grew up on Summer Street, about maybe 3/4 of a mile from here.
Okay.
And this is my hangout.
Okay.
I used to come down here to Kirkpatrick and Center,
Okay.
which at the time was the place to be. And back then, the 5 and 10, the shoe store, the gas station, a lot of places to hang out were busy. And as a kid, I spent a lot of time on Center Avenue. So this is a revisiting of where I grew up. So I'm excited to participate in this project.
Oh, great, thank you. Now, so there's a lot of historical places on the Hill, a lot of places that really stick out to people, a lot of memories that were had on the Hill. I even read that the Hill was considered like the Harlem of Pittsburgh.
Yes.
At one point, because of all the activity, the musicians, actors and actresses, people who just came to Pittsburgh, people who were here and doing great things. So one place I want to kind of start with our conversation is the New Granada Theater,
Okay.
which has been a fixture in the Hill District. I believe it was built sometime between 1927 and 1928.
Something like that, yeah. My mother graduated from high school in 29.
Okay.
And when I was a kid, there were really 2 theaters. One kind of gets overlooked, and that's the Roosevelt Theater,
Okay.
which was a half a block down the street on the other side. But the New Granada was more than a theater. Above it was the Savoy Ballroom.
Okay.
And my mother tells stories of, going down there to dance when she was a young lady. And it was at the Savoy Ballroom above the New Granada Theater that I saw James Brown.
Oh, wow.
And that would have been like in 58,
Okay.
something like that. And I can remember vividly, James Brown was performing on the level. There wasn't a stage.
Oh, wow.
And when he did his cape thing, when
Right.
the guy comes out, the guy actually kind of shoved me aside, and I was wondering, what's up? And they put the cape on him, and then he jumped up.
Oh, wow.
So the Hill District has an incredibly rich history. The New Granada was ingrained in many of us because many Saturdays they had 17 cartoons.
Oh, wow.
And you used to be able to, for the price of a regular admission, go in and see 17 cartoons. Then usually there would be a series like Captain America or Captain Midnight or something like that. And then in addition to that, there was a movie.
Okay.
So the New Granada was really a center of the Hill. I wouldn't say the center, but the New Granada was one of those places that could be the center of a circle, but there were multiple circles,
Right.
So along Center Avenue at that time, there were, I think, 4 drugstores
Okay.
from the New Granada up to Kirkpatrick. So Uh, there were sodas that where they made Coca-Cola, and they would put Coke syrup in a glass and then put the seltzer water in.
Oh, wow.
So you would be making the Coke from scratch, really.
Oh, wow.
So I've got a lot of fond memories of the New Granada, the Savoy Theater, and everything up and down Center Avenue.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, do you think, like, for instance, that James Brown show, was that an affair where, like, all ages could kind of come?
Yeah, I was a kid.
Okay.
So I guess I'd have been 15,
Okay.
14, something like that. I was born in 44, and as we're filming this, or as we're taping this, it's 23, you know?
Right.
So I'm coming up on my 79th birthday. So when I talk about the 50s, I'm talking about really the prime of my youth.
Right.
You know, this weekend I'll be going to my 60th high school reunion.
Oh, that's awesome.
So this Center Avenue and this part of Center Avenue was central to my teenage life. I spent a lot of time down this way.
Oh, okay. Okay. Awesome. Now, do you think, because I know you said there was the Roosevelt, which is kind of often forgot, was there a theater that was more utilized, do you think, more like than the other?
I think the New Granada probably was the more popular of the two, and
Okay.
probably the most modern.
Okay.
But if anyone is interested and you go look at the Teenie Harris archives,
Right.
you'll see a lot of people dressed to the nines going to affairs at the Roosevelt also.
Okay.
So both theaters were kind of central to the life of the Hill District. I think one of the things that people really don't understand is that the Hill District was essentially a downtown in terms of shopping. There were places to get clothes. There were places to relax. There were clubs. And so for many people, the Hill was self-contained.
Right.
You really didn't have to go out of the Hill for a lot of life's necessities.
Right. Like the money kind of stayed in
A
the
lot of
Hill.
the money stayed in the neighborhood. And I would say that there was, when the lower hill was raised in the mid 50s to late 50s, the displacement included a lot of Jewish families and Jewish businesses.
Right.
And a lot of those businesses, particularly the Jewish businesses, kind of were dotted through Center Avenue.
Right.
I remember there was a live chicken store.
Okay.
And when you walked in the door, there was a coop of live chickens to your right.
Oh.
And when you walked in, you actually could pick out the chicken that you wanted killed.
Oh, wow.
And the story was when people came into the store, the chickens were jostling to be in the back.
Oh. Oh, poor chicken.
Yeah, but they would actually, you'd select the chicken, they would wring its neck, cut its head off in front of you, start to drain it, defeather it, and you know, you would have fried chicken literally within an hour of the chicken having been killed.
Oh, wow. I bet the food was much fresher and healthier back then.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, not processed
Right.
or anything.
Right. You're getting it all right in front of you.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a lot of activity on the Center Avenue in the Hill during that time. But you mentioned a lot of Jewish families lived on the Hill during that time. I know we have a few synagogues
Exactly.
that were here. Like, do you know, did you know anyone who attended those synagogues?
I didn't know
or anything?
anyone who attended them. The Center Avenue, the church on Center Avenue, and again with the dome, and I can't think of it, but I can remember when it transitioned to a church
Okay.
from a synagogue. I remember that church because I won't use his name, but there was a gentleman on my street who passed away, and he was a very old gentleman, and the steps to the synagogue and next, as it became a church, were very steep, and they dropped him.
Oh
And,
my.
and I have vivid memories of it. I guess I'd have been about 10 years old. The casket didn't pop open, the body didn't fall out, but it was a lot of older men who were carrying him up the steps and they had a side door, but I remember when they dropped the gentleman who lived on my street.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so, you think about Hill District life, and there were a lot of adventures and a lot of memories.
Right. And so it was pretty, maybe not completely integrated, but it was pretty integrated during that time?
The Hill District was, during my youth, I would say was integrated business-wise, but not living-wise.
Okay.
All right. So the house that I grew up in was purchased from a Jewish family on Summer Street. On the street where I lived, on Summer Street, 709 Summers, there used to be a public school called Minersville.
Oh.
And Minersville was a section of Pittsburgh, of the Hill District. And Minersville was right across. And my mother used to go to elementary school there, literally across the street. Okay, so there were coal mines in the Hill.
Oh wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, the Hill District was a melting pot as as African Americans began to move from the South north, and properties that were available to them, and kind of properties that are mentioned in the August Wilson sagas. A lot of those stories took place in properties that were once Jewish.
Okay.
And the same with Sugartop, further up the hill, that there were white families that were displaced from Sugartop. So as African Americans became more affluent and could afford better houses, they moved to the upper hill.
Okay.
And in many cases, the more economically strained African Americans were in the lower hill.
Interesting.
So I think the thing that it's important to note about all of this is that it was all purposeful.
Right.
It wasn't accidental.
Right.
There were real estate policies and very purposeful exclusion of African Americans from moving to other communities.
Right.
And probably during the historical journey, you'll hear about Dwelling House Savings and Loan.
Okay, yes.
And
yes.
Mr. Laval.
Right.
And one of the fights that he fought successfully was to really provide financing and access to housing for African Americans. So Mr. Laval helped my wife and I purchase the house that I live in to this day.
Okay.
And we moved into our house with not a penny down.
Oh wow, and that's unheard of.
Right.
In this day and age, that's unheard of.
Exactly. And Mr. Laval was that committed to helping young families. So will always have a soft spot in my heart for dwelling house savings and loan,
Right.
real estate.
That's awesome. I never really knew the complete history of that, at least growing up. A very good friend of my parents used to work there. He was a real estate agent there.
What was his name?
William Bowles.
Okay.
Bill Bowles.
There was a guy named Milton Holt
Okay.
who was the guy who sold me my house.
Okay.
But I think Mr. Laval really deserves a lot of credit, because the fight that he fought, the fight that the Johnson brothers fought in law, both became judges. There were a lot of significant fights in the 50s and 60s that a lot of young people today don't know anything about,
Right.
and they were real fights.
Right. Kind of set the foundation for a lot of the stuff that we have access to now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I kind of want to steer the conversation into more of an entertaining type of way. The Crawford Grill too.
Okay, now we're talking about the Crawford Grill right here.
Yes.
And I'm pointing toward Wiley Avenue. The heyday of the Crawford Grill was before I was old enough to go there.
Right. Okay.
So let me say that. But the Crawford Grill really had everybody come through. All of the jazz greats of the 50s and 60s stopped at the Crawford Grill. And even if they performed at a place that was allegedly more popular,
Right.
a lot of the jazz greats would come and jam there
Okay.
late in the night. And there was the Crawford Grill, there was the Hurricane,
Okay.
and the Hurricane was down on Center Avenue. And there was another place at the corner of Chauncey and Wiley that was called Mutt's Hut.
Oh.
And that's a place that many people, who are from the hood,
Right.
would remember, and they had great entertainers. And I can remember seeing Johnny Mathis there, not as a performer, but he came there after a show. And Mutt's Hut was kind of a hole in the wall. It was a small place, and as teenagers, we would stand outside and listen to the music.
Okay.
But Pittsburgh was the center, or one of the centers, of the jazz world back in those days.
Now, were these places like the Hurricane, like the Crawford Grill, were they accessible to everybody, regardless of if you were Upper Hill or Lower Hill or things like that? Everybody.
Yeah, everybody went. Although if you went to the Hurricane, the owner, I can't remember her last name. Her name was Miss Birdie. I think that's it. And if you would be in there, and I experienced this, when I was 22, 23, and you sat at a table and you tried to nurse a drink, she would come and say, "Hey, honey, it's time for another drink," because she really didn't countenance people coming in and having one drink and then sitting for the entertainment.
Right.
So she would circulate through the crowd to make sure that you were drinking.
So it was very a lively place.
It was a lively place. And I think another thing that should be emphasized, that it was largely a safe place. People from all communities, all races came to the Hurricane, came to really all of the clubs in the Hill District without fear. And it was a welcoming community for everybody.
Now, when you kind of look at places like the Hurricane, Crawford Grill, I know there were a lot of like different clubs and bars in the Hill and along Center Avenue and things like that. The Hurricane, at least that I know, the only one with a woman who was in
Yes.
charge, and
Yes.
was that something that was not shocking but a little bit like wow, or was it like just it was pretty
It
normal?
was from the time that I became aware of the hurricane, it had a woman owner.
Okay.
And it wasn't, I wasn't heavy enough into what I would call the bar scene
Okay.
to be able to say, boy, that's different than other places.
Okay.
Okay. But she was just omnipresent. She was there and she was running her business.
Right.
And it was as simple as that. So it wasn't shocking, or it wasn't something that surprised me, because like I said, this would have been, shortly after I graduated from college.
Okay.
My introduction to the bar scene included a woman owner, and it wasn't at all out of place for me.
Okay. I think that's awesome. I just recently read an article that was stating that women weren't allowed to get checking accounts on their own until 1974, and that just blows my mind. So then when I think about women, in the 40s and the 50s who were owning bars and owning clubs and owning businesses and doing these things, especially like within the Black community,
Right.
that's just really amazing.
Yeah, I believe there are likely many untold stories
Right.
of women who stood as a strong force behind successful men.
Right.
But the times dictated that the men got the credit.
Right. They were kind of in the front.
But I remember very quickly, my dad was a number runner.
Okay.
Okay, he wrote numbers, and when I was a kid, I used to run numbers. And a lot of the smaller kind of people would go to different houses to book, to place their numbers.
My parents would
Okay.
too. I remember that. Mhm.
And a lot of those were women,
Right.
So I would go to pick up numbers for my father, and I can remember Miss Hattie Bell, and you'd go in Miss Hattie Bell's house, and she always would have liquor in there, and it was kind of a gathering place of a lot of numbers people, but she was kind of in charge
Right.
of that little numbers clique.
Right.
So I know that there were a lot of women who were undoubtedly fully ingrained into the rich history of the Hill District,
Right.
in its development economically, socially, who remain unknown
Right.
to us,
Right.
because history hasn't been kind in recording the contributions of many people, African Americans in general and African American women specifically.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's very true. We've been working forever. The women's rights movement really
Exactly.
didn't necessarily apply to us in a lot of ways. We've always worked and we've always been a part of business and commerce and things like that. So yeah. Now I know you said that you don't have a lot because Greenleaf Field was before your time.
Yeah.
But just anything that you can remember, because we were talking earlier and you were telling me some stuff about your parents and about your mom specifically. Just anything that you can.
Yeah, the Greenleaf Field was up where the Bedford dwellings.
Right, the historic marker is right in front of where I grew up. So.
Okay, and my mother dated and knew some of the ball players.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't, my mother was 32 when I was born. So, you know, she had a single life
Right.
for many years, and she talks about Oscar Charlton and some of the other ball players of that time. And the thing that stands out was that Greenleaf Field was a true community asset. You know, I mean, people came out to support
Right.
the Crawfords and the Grays. That it was part of the community. There were many great ball players who played here in Pittsburgh up at Greenleaf Field. And again, it's another one of those stories that is not fully told,
Right.
and the reality that it was financed by numbers.
Really?
Yeah, Gus Greenleaf was a
Okay.
number man.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow.
You know, and again, that's another part of the history. And Greenleaf and others who were heading the numbers in the black community, they were very generous people. They were not exploitive.
Right.
You know, so you're talking about people who were playing 50 cents worth of numbers a day. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money that you had to invest to play numbers.
Right.
But when people needed to either play numbers on credit or
Right.
they needed a loan, a lot of times it was the numbers bankers
Who would?
that would give a loan and kind of help people through hard times.
Pardon me 1 second. I'm gonna take a quick pause. And I will be right back.
Okie doke.
I feel
I understand.
sneezing. I don't know if it's those gnats that are flying around us.
I can see them.
Okay. I didn't feel
Yeah.
sneezing until the gnats, but I don't think I can be allergic to gnats. So I'm not sure. Okay, sorry. All right. So we'll pick it right back up. Dylan will edit this out. We'll pick it right back
Right.
up with the numbers runners.
Well, it's just that the economy of the Hill kept some amount of money in the community. My mother and father never married, but you obviously knew who my dad was, and he wrote numbers for the Italians and
wow.
the Jews, and it was interesting. I had a chance. I don't know if I should name. Well, there was a guy named Myra Siegel,
Okay.
who was kind of the top guy in the Jewish community for a number. And there was a guy named Tony Grosso, who was the top guy in the Italian numbers. And my dad wrote numbers for both of them. So there were times when I would go to Squirrel Hill and see a pile of money at Myra Siegel's house. And then you would go out to Mount Lebanon and see a pile of money at Tony Grosso's house.
Oh, wow.
You know, so those were rich memories. And I remember Tony Grosso used to give me a handful of quarters, you know,
Right.
and I put them in, about $5 worth of quarters. And those are memories.
Right,
Those are memories.
definitely. That reminds me of, I don't know if you ever saw that movie Hoodlum with Lawrence Fishburne.
Yes, yeah.
That's what that reminds me of, just listening to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Because like my parents would go to a numbers lady and do numbers. And my uncle, my dad's brother, he was a numbers guy.
Okay.
He was a numbers guy. He was even on a chain gang before.
Okay.
For running numbers and some other stuff. But yeah, so it's very interesting when you think about that sort of history and whether right or wrong, whatever.
I think it was right. It was at a time when there was purposeful exclusion from the mainstream economy.
Right.
Communities did what they could to survive.
Right.
And numbers was one of those things. And regrettably, some of the things that happen in the underbelly of the community are the results of, well, now we call them the social determinants of health.
Right.
But you put a lot of people in concentrated communities,
right.
And don't provide economic opportunities for people to become independently self-sufficient.
Right.
You got to do what you got to do.
Right.
And numbers was one of those things.
Fed a lot of families.
Fed a lot of families.
I'm sure.
And for the most part, it was, when we talk about gaming today, when gaming came to Pittsburgh, I was chair of the gaming task force. Okay? And the Mayor Murphy had asked me and another lady, Ann Swaber, to be co-chairs. And we wanted to examine the impacts of gaming on Pittsburgh, because this was 3 or 4 years before the casino was built, and nobody knew exactly what would happen, whether or not it would lead to like a decline in wherever it was built, whether prostitutes were there, whether crime followed gaming.
Right.
And we did a lot of research, and one of the things I learned is that when you talk about gaming, there are statistics that show that about 7% of people who game are gonna allow it to interfere with their lives.
Right.
Whether it's numbers or whether it's the casino.
Right.
That some people, because of the way that gaming works in your head,
right,
are not going to be able to handle it. So certainly there were people who didn't benefit from numbers, and there were homes that were wrecked because people gambled away money.
Right.
But I would argue that it's no different than the number of people that gamble away their lives at the casino.
Right.
It's something that happens in the human experience.
Right.
So I think there's a case to be made that numbers was in some way celebratory rather than negative for the community when you look at it over the long haul.
Right. Especially you said it helped finance Greenleaf Field.
Right.
So.
Exactly.
Now let me ask you this. Now I know when the casino, even before it was built, when they were bringing gaming to Pittsburgh, I remember hearing talk about possibly something for the Hill District or that lower Hill District. Do you think that would have been? Do you think it's good that did not happen for the Hill District?
When that happened, there are two parts of the story, and I'll try to be quick. Number one, I served as chair of the Hill House Board of Directors.
Yes, and I definitely want to ask you more about that.
Okay, so I was kind of involved in stuff as things were beginning to break. And then as a co-chair of the Pittsburgh Gaming Task Force, I did not publicly take a side.
Okay.
Okay, because we were advisory. We had nothing to do with the decision. We wanted to better understand and to influence, perhaps through education, the kind of givebacks that gaming should provide, have some sense of the social impact of the social impact of gaming.
Right.
So I will say that this, I want to preface what I'm going to say is that I ain't getting on nobody's case
Right.
about where people stood then.
Right.
I would argue now, in retrospect, that having the casino in the Lower Hill would have been an incentivizer of economic activity for the community.
Okay.
But just as the North Side location has not been a great benefit to African Americans on the North Side,
Right.
it would have taken a lot of conscious effort by the Hill District to make sure that this community
Right.
was included.
Right.
That would not have happened automatically.
Right.
But the opportunity to do it was there,
Okay.
okay? And a lot of opposition was on religious grounds. You know, many of the churches
Okay.
were against gaming and gambling. And my feeling on that is that one of the safest places in Pittsburgh is around the casino.
That's true. I kind of agree with you on that.
You know,
that's true.
there's there's very little, if any, prostitution, certainly none that's open.
Right.
When you think of, crime statistics, which I've looked at,
Right.
they're not very high around the casino.
Right.
And I think that some of that arguably could have been a benefit to the Hill. But that's looking that's looking through a lens of 15 or 20 years ago.
Right.
And I am not questioning the degree to which people opposed it then.
Right.
So I'm looking through the lens of, 15 or 20 years later. And it makes me think that there could have been an outcome that was community benefiting. But I certainly would respect people who wouldn't agree with my viewpoint.
Right.
Right.
Now, you mentioned being chairman
Of the Hill House.
Of the Hill House, of their board.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
The Hill House was in transition, and my young friend Evan Frazier
Yeah.
was the chair, and Evan and I had been in Leadership Pittsburgh together. And the board was kind of fractured at the time. So I was drafted to come on for 1 year. And in 1 year, we managed to make some changes in the board.
Right.
And it wasn't a time when I was drafted to be friends with everybody.
Right.
And then, I'm drawing a blank on his name. I see him, but and I'm drawing a blank if I think of it later. But the guy who came after me was just a great leader, and they moved on to open up or to redo the performance space
Okay.
and to and to put some money in the building. But the Hill House is one of those institutions that was caught, like so many institutions, in swirling times.
Right.
Things were changing, the foundation community was changing, the measurements of success were shifting, and the Hill House ran into challenges, but I can say that the leadership that Evan gave, the leadership that Cheryl gave after Evan, there were good people on the board, good people in leadership, but